Hailed as the series that will change television in September of 1989, Twin Peaks did. David Lynch and Mark Frost brought film to television for the first time, forever altering how TV shows are made. Not just with many of the cast and crew coming from movies, such as Richard Beymer, who starred in West Side Story, or David Lynch, who famously directed Head with Hammer, but also with its unique, at the time, approach to being directed cinematically, as if the show was one long movie. It's hard to believe nowadays, but before the show's premiere, many critics just saw TV shows as superficial and less prestigious than film, although now the line between them is practically non-existent, all thanks to Twin Peaks. But it wasn't just North America that was caught up in trying to figure out who killed Laura Palmer. A year after the show initially premiered, Twin Peaks came to Japan through the country's first private satellite broadcasting company, WOWOW. They've been around since 1984, but in 1991 they introduced their paid TV broadcasting service. Twin Peaks was part of the service's launch and introduced the country to the small town. It was such a success that over 30% of its subscribers reported joining just so they could watch Twin Peaks. Within a little over a year of its premiere, WOW had broadcast the series 7 times. Because of this boom, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me was released in Japan first, and it was seen as such a big deal that Laura Palmer funerals were performed, a Laura Palmer altar was erected at Japan's busiest railway station, and it even got to the point where the nation's largest travel agency, Japan Travel Bureau, organized the Twin Peaks package tour, where the guests stay at the Great Northern Hotel, visit the Double M Diner, walk down to the beach where Laura's body was found, and more. But for those who couldn't afford the trip, WOW teamed up with the movie production company Office 2-1 to make what's now known today as the Twin Peaks visual soundtrack. Although in 2007 WOW went on to establish WOW Films, by this point they had no track record in movie production, only publishing, but despite this, they gave the task of creating a virtual trip to Twin Peaks to a team of 8 who had never worked on movies before or after this film. All we really know is that the group started shooting in late 1991, and on May 19, 1992, their finished work was released to the Japanese public exclusively on Laserdisc. It was discontinued before the year was over, never being reissued, just relegated to the occasional generous $500 eBay posting. Because of this, it's tempting to write off the movie as just being made to solely profit off of the Twin Peaks mania going on at the time, and yeah, it was undoubtedly just made for the peakers, or Pika as Japanese fans would call themselves, but watching it 32 years later, after the mania has died down and Twin Peaks has just become something for alternative women to post on their Instagram story every February 24th, myself included obviously, it holds up as more than just a cash grab and instead as a love letter to the series made with the same care that Lynch and Frost put into the show. It seems borderline impossible, but at some point that original goal of a virtual trip to Twin Peaks was transcended. It became a window into fan culture, some of the most iconic television sets, and the damn fine towns of Snoqualmie. As is very heavily implied by its name, the Twin Peaks visual soundtrack features the same 11 songs released on the album, Soundtrack from Twin Peaks by Angelo Badalamenti, in the same order. It feels unnecessary to discuss the actual album itself in depth because that's been done to death, but if you somehow never heard it or of it, it's one of, if not the best television soundtracks of all time. Just like the show itself, the music goes from heartbreaking to silly to enigmatic, all while having this eerie and dreamlike feel to it, as if something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on what. These heavy emotions that each track brings are completely understood by the visual soundtrack, not only yielding a similar feeling to when you watch the show for the first time, but also allowing for the recontextualization of these themes, breathing new life into music that's now decades old. Every moment is just genuinely captivating. Even something as simple as the fade-in of title cards has you engrossed by just the idea of what you're about to see. Obviously, thanks in part to everything mentioned thus far, but also because with each title card comes a new location and song to accompany it. They're usually pretty straightforward. Audrey's Dance shows the Great Northern Hotel, the Bookhouse Boys shows the Sheriff's Department, and Laura Palmer's theme shows the train yard, which might seem very by the numbers. We've heard Audrey's theme accompanied by footage of the Great Northern Hotel before, but where the Twin Peaks visual soundtrack becomes special is the new perspective it gives of these locations we've seen countless times. Sometimes, these new perspectives are quite literal. The opening for the Great Northern Hotel is shot from a position the Twin Peaks crew never did. You see the road outside that leads to it as real people drive past, going about their day-to-day life before it pans over to the hotel itself from an angle we've never seen. If you haven't watched the show before, it's probably hard to care about. Like the rest of the visual soundtrack, it's shot well but doesn't carry much meaning on its own. On the other hand, if you've seen the show, it's sort of incredible. Here's a place we've seen over the course of 2 seasons in almost every single episode, but now it feels surreal in the most literal sense of the word. That's not to say the world of Twin Peaks felt totally fake. It's an amazingly crafted show with a large ensemble cast that features many different locations, but you never see what's just outside of them, and it sort of taunts you in a way. In Pokemon Snap, you're completely on rails. You can move the camera around, but everything you're seeing has been meticulously planned out beforehand. Same with any show. The director has an exact shot in mind, and that's what you're seeing. In video games, at the very least, you can break the boundaries and take the camera anywhere you want, but most of the time, it's just nothing. The same would happen with most shows and movies. You'd see a set with lighting equipment, cameramen, and a director, not the world continuing outwards. Obviously, that's not always the case. Other shows are shot on location, but it's hard to think of any with landmarks as iconic as Twin Peaks. The show reuses the same sites in each episode, always shown from similar perspectives, so for the Twin Peaks visual soundtrack to give a glimpse of what's outside that 4x3 box, it's something special, especially on the other tracks when that concept is taken even further. The 7th song on the album, Into the Night, is, from my understanding, only used once in the entire show during the episode Cooper's Dreams. As a result, there's not really a location heavily tied to this song, so instead, it's used as a chance to show us basically everything that's not Twin Peaks. The actual history of the county the show uses, children crossing over the train track on their walk from school, and some of the county's absolutely gorgeous greenery. It's definitely only tangentially related to Twin Peaks, but just like with the different angle of the Great Northern Hotel, it feels like a continuation. Almost every shot here feels like a slightly off version of something that could be in the show, in an alternate universe where they decided to show the county museum or school children walking home. It sort of makes your brain start to wonder about what these scenes might have been like if these locations were included. However, the best showcases of what was never featured goes in the opposite direction of this line of thinking. It's hinted at during the 4th track, The Nightingale, where we're exploring the Double R Diner. At first, we just see shots of the workers inside, but eventually it cuts to a poster that's been too out of focus to recognize thus far. Dale Cooper and his boy toy Harry Truman. Up until this point, the movie has never shown any impact that the show left on the town, instead choosing to capture it as it was shown in Twin Peaks. Even the text displayed on the bottom commits to this by sharing facts not about the actual towns themselves, but about the local folklore of Twin Peaks. But after the camera is zoomed out to make the poster once again out of focus, it remains that way for the rest of the segment, even when going inside the Double R Diner itself. The shot is quick but effective, leaving us with a poignant reminder of the impact the show has left while teasing the final segment, Falling. With only 3 minutes left in the movie's runtime, it hard cuts to a store advertising their Twin Peaks t-shirts. This sign is definitely less jarring after seeing the poster, but what really sticks with you is the inside. What seems like just a normal Hallmark card store slowly begins to reveal more and more Twin Peaks merchandise. At first just the t-shirts, but by the end you've seen books, coffee mugs, VHS tapes, maps, newspapers, audio cassettes, truly every single piece of Twin Peaks merchandise imaginable, some of it seemingly made by the store itself. This film, so clearly made by fans, takes a moment of self-reflection. These towns have been forever altered, becoming a tourist destination for hundreds, if not thousands of people wanting to see the same sights the movie spent the last 50 minutes visiting. The crew is no different than anyone else who's done the same pilgrimage, and in this moment, they show recognition of that. There's truly no better way they could have ended this movie. At least if you were sitting thinking about not the locations of the show, but the real towns that made everything possible and the fan culture surrounding them. Whether this permanent change of town legacy is good or bad, it leaves you to reflect on that as the credits roll. Of course, the movie isn't entirely made up of what's not seen in the show. In fact, my other favorite moments come from locations we've seen before. Laura Palmer's theme has you at first just walking through the woods, but you slowly start to realize where you are right before the train car becomes just barely visible in the background. Although the inside of the train car does differ from the set used for Twin Peaks, the exploration of it is perfectly shot to match the music, and the use of the handheld camera exclusively for this and the beach where her body was found makes both feel so much more personal. Even footage of the more mundane, like the sheriff office's long table, makes you stop and appreciate the beauty of Twin Peaks that's looked over in the show because you're distracted by the pale horse that just materialized out of nowhere and... oh wait, no, it's gone again. But when the perfect music choice consistently accompanies every shot, it's difficult not to have each location bring back your memories of the show. Realistically, not everyone will feel this way. It's hard to imagine that the Twin Peaks visual soundtrack is for everyone, especially those who haven't watched the show, but for most fans, it's a must-see. Unfortunately, as mentioned, there's been no official release since its discontinuation in 1992, but thankfully, it has been preserved online by YouTuber Lonely Soul, making it extremely accessible to watch on anything except your fucking iPhone.